In 2016, we built an unbeatable operation that changed history. Now, we unveil our next breakthrough. The exclusive Trump 2020 app. This isn't just an app. This is your source for real news, not fake news. Straight from the campaign and the president himself. This is your direct line to give input on key campaign issues. Your portal to register voters. Host MAGA meetups. Your scheduler. Your application on becoming a Trump team leader. Join millions and get a front row seat to our virtual events. Watch Team Trump every night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Earn points, get rewarded. Get the presidential photo. Oh, and did we mention it? This is your personal shopper too? So just to repeat, this isn't just an app. This is your tool to keep America great. Join the army for Trump and download the app today.
Trump campaign is now reaching voters online.
You are seeing the President of the United States. Look at the lines.
You join our movement.
A lot of President Trump supporters here.
Greatest movement in the history of our country.
I think the one thing we can say they all have in common is they are fighters. Both figuratively and literally.
We are leaders in our community is going to ensure that President Trump gets reelected soundly in November.
Because we have such strong leadership coming from the White House, we are making it through.
God has called President Trump for this purpose in this time. So let's keep voting for him, and we will keep winning.
I honestly don't know why Joe Biden is running. He can't remember anything.
President Trump has been a champion for families and in particular for mothers.
And he ran on, I'm going to build the wall.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Team Trump Online. I'm Lara Trump, and tonight we are so excited to be joined by our very special guest, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Welcome to Team Trump Online, and Leader McConnell, thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be with you, Laura. Looking forward to talking to you about what's going on.
Well, there's so much to talk about. Why don't we start by turning our focus to China and Joe Biden's cozy relationship with the communist regime. Senator McConnell, you recently tweeted about the pandemic and how the global spread was made worse by China's unconscionable efforts to cover it up. You also said that the United States will be asking tough questions about our relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. From concealing information to threatening whistleblowers to donating faulty protective equipment, the Chinese Communist Party has exacerbated this virus, harming people and nations across the world. So how is the Senate working with President Trump to remain tough on China and hold them accountable for this really unconscionable behavior?
Well, you know, even before the pandemic, President Trump was the only president we've had in recent years of either party who really tried to stand up to the Chinese and the way they operate. They've been stealing intellectual property for years, taking advantage of us in our commercial relationships for years. And one of the hallmarks of any communist regime, whether it's in Moscow or in Beijing, is they aren't transparent. They aren't honest. They aren't honest with their own people. Yep. And this is an example where that lack of transparency, that lack of honesty, didn't just affect the Chinese people, it affected the rest of the world. President Trump stood up early on and said, let's stop the travel from China. That saved a lot of American lives right there. But they found it impossible to be honest with the rest of the world because they're not accustomed to being honest with their own people. And that kind of regime gets away with it as long as it's tolerated internally. You got to wonder how long the Chinese people are willing to put up with this. Now, since we're not in China, we're going to be looking for ways not to put up with it any longer. And I think one of the things that many businesses are going to be looking at, particularly if they're in the healthcare field, rearranging their supply chain. Didn't work out very well. That we ended up being dependent upon China for a lot of things we needed when this pandemic hit. So, lesson learned. I think a lot of companies are going to be repositioning their supply chain, whether it's in things like personal protective equipment or ventilators or even pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Because you don't want to be completely dependent upon. Look, I think global trade is basically a good thing. It's been good for countries around the world. But this is an example where you have to balance your national security against a completely free and open market, and look at where the weaknesses might be and move to fix them. Now, I think these companies will probably do that on their own. You know, they're not going to want to get burned again. But certainly we're going to be encouraging companies to take a look at it. They claim pandemics only happen once every 100 years, but what if that's no longer true? We want to be early ready for the next one, because clearly the Obama administration did not leave to this administration any kind of game plan for something like this.
That's exactly right. And just to piggyback off a little bit of what you said, China recently threatened the United States with cutting off pharmaceutical exports from the United States to plunge us into the mighty sea of coronavirus, as they called it. With that in mind, let's revisit some statements by Joe Biden, because you're exactly right. The Obama-Biden administration left us high and dry in this time right now. And you know what? Joe Biden is asking people to vote for him to become president in a couple of months down the road. And you know what? If Joe Biden wants to become president, then he's got a lot of questions to answer. Joe Biden repeatedly downplayed the serious threat that China poses to the United States and free nations around the world. He criticized the president's life-saving China travel restrictions, as you just mentioned. He called them xenophobic and fear-mongering for about 2 months before his campaign suddenly, Leader McConnell, claimed he supported them all along. It's kind of funny how that works. He continues to resist holding China accountable for the global coronavirus pandemic, even when President Trump responded to China's outrageous claim that the United States military was responsible for the virus's outbreak. Senator McConnell, what sort of damage do you think Joe Biden's China appeasement could pose to American strength and security?
Well, look, a Biden administration would create a lot of problems for America, but this is probably at the top of the list. As you pointed out, to declare the travel ban xenophobic means he must have had his head in the sand about the health challenge this was going to become, not just for this country, but for the rest of the world. So I think Biden's whole attitude reminds me of what Bob Gates, who served as Secretary of Defense under both Bush and Obama, once said about Joe Biden. He said he couldn't think of a single time that he ever got a foreign policy decision right.
Yep.
Bob Gates, who worked for both George Bush and Barack Obama, about Joe Biden's approach to the rest of the world.
Yep. And by the way, President Trump, on the other hand, has rightly stood up to China like really no president before him. I think you said this earlier. He called out the Chinese Communist Party for stealing technology, forcing the transfer of technology as the price of doing business in China, manipulating their currency to affect world markets, and illegally dumping products like steel. So this president has been calling out China for long before the coronavirus became a problem. He's been standing up to them every step of the way. He's trying to level the playing field with trade with China. And by the way, he's been talking about this for about 30 years. So we know this has always been a focus of his. But this is a president who is on the right side of this, who is doing the right thing when it comes to China. And as you just pointed out, Joe Biden, it seems, has taken the wrong path and made the wrong choice pretty much in any foreign policy decision that has needed to be made, at least while he was part of the Obama-Biden administration. Senator McConnell, stay right there. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with more Team Trump Online.
I'm ready to go.
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked a $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
Why are we getting nervous, man? China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
The growth of China is overwhelmingly in our interest. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. That travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
Hysterical xenophobia. Xenophobia.
Joe.
I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Hey everybody, I'm Lara Trump. The race to November is heating up, and the Trump campaign is gearing up to work harder than ever before to secure 4 more years for President Trump. To achieve this historic win, we need you, your friends, your neighbors, and your families to join our movement. Ready to fight for President Trump? Text ENLIST to 88022 and register at armyfortrump.com today.
All right, welcome back to Team Trump Online. With me tonight is leader Mitch McConnell. Senator McConnell, the Trump administration and the Senate have been working hand in hand to provide much needed relief to America's workers and small businesses to bridge the gap to the phased reopening of our nation's economy. We know everybody is excited to get back to work. So what are some of the achievements you and President Trump have secured to keep our economy running?
Well, Congress has passed and the president has signed multiple bills to try to help America through this shutdown. I mean, in effect, because of the public health concerns, we've had the bizarre situation in which we've shut down our own economy.
Right.
CARES Act, the $2.2 trillion bill that was written in my office in conjunction with the administration, provided a significant amount of funds for small businesses, for hospitals, for others who were struggling, trying to get through this period. Collectively, we've already spent about, or in the process of spending about $2.8 trillion. We now have a debt the size of our economy. So I have said, and the president has said as well, that we need to take a pause here and take a look at what we've done, see what's working, see what isn't, and also begin to encourage the governors around the country who have the decision-making ability to begin to open up the economy, to carefully and in a measured way, consistent with the White House Coronavirus Task Force recommendations, begin to open our country up again. We can't borrow enough money prop the economy up forever.
Right.
We need to be beginning to move in the direction of opening our country up again. We've talked about the health consequences of opening up too soon. Let's talk a minute about the health consequences of not opening up soon enough. I hear suicides are up. I hear domestic violence is up. I hear child abuse is up. If that's true, then we're also paying for the price for being shuttered up at home. The notion that there are no health consequences of a shutdown is also not true. And so we've got a challenge here as we begin to move forward to getting back to normalcy. But also, wear a mask. I do. Make sure you're 6 feet away from everybody. It can be done. So
right.
I want to applaud the president for beginning to encourage the governors to begin to open up our economy. It's the only ultimate solution.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. There are other consequences health-wise. I mean, you think about the fact that it's been 2 months now that we've been shut down really as a country. People aren't going to the doctors regularly. Maybe they're missing something, that could be a serious health threat to them, as well as all of those things you just mentioned. And we know America and Americans love to work. So we need to get people back to work. And I think that it's been really inspiring to see how some states really have moved forward and things look like they're on the right track. So we hope and pray that they stay in that direction. And to your point, yeah, wear a mask, wash your hands, do the right things, and hopefully we can all get back to normal soon. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add about delayed health care. Well, all the governors put in these temporary bans on elective surgery.
Right.
And it made sense at the time because you thought they were going to be overloaded with COVID patients. If you take my state, for example, we had hospitals in which they had little or no COVID cases. Mm-hmm. But elective surgery is where they make money. They don't make any money off of Medicare and Medicaid. So they were bleeding red ink as a result of not being allowed to deal with people's healthcare problems that need to be met with. So, as you pointed out, you've got the people who delayed the health care they needed during this time as well. That needs to come to an end. Hospitals need to be able to deal with regular health care concerns that Americans have that shouldn't be put on hold any longer as we begin to open up the country.
Yep. Senator McConnell, despite the president's expert-backed guidelines for reopening the economy, some Democrats seem insistent on not only keeping the economy shut down, but also stalling relief to workers and businesses in the meantime. Why do Democrats insist on keeping people out of work, holding them hostage over ridiculous demands?
I don't know what it is, but I think you're right. If you look at the rhetoric, the Democrats seem to actually prefer keeping people locked up at home.
Yep.
That's one of the reasons some of the governors have begun to run into trouble. My governor in Kentucky, for example, has lost 2 cases in federal court because he overreached. He tried to have a travel ban in which you couldn't leave or enter the state. This federal judge shut him down on that. He tried to prevent people from having drive-in church services on Easter Sunday. The services were consistent with CDC guidelines. People didn't get out of their cars. They were 6 feet apart. He got struck down in court. So some of these governors, particularly the Democrat governors, it seems, enjoy this extra power over people's lives. And people are beginning to chafe at it. And it's ended up in court in a couple of cases, as I mentioned. And the governors have been struck down, have been overruled for being sort of drunk with power at the opportunity to keep everybody locked up.
Yeah, well, we know the Democrats always like more government and generally Republicans like less government. So I guess Leader McConnell, no surprise there. I want to touch on something that we kind of spoke about earlier. Former President Obama slammed President Trump's coronavirus response. And I think it was kind of unnecessary for the former president to criticize President Trump, especially given the Obama and Biden administration did not prepare our nation for a pandemic, as we just discussed. What is your response to that?
Generally, former presidents just don't do that. I remember President George W. Bush and his father went right through 8 years of Democratic administrations after they left office and kept their mouths shut because they didn't feel it was appropriate for former presidents to be to critique even a president of another party. So I think President Obama should have kept his mouth shut. We know he doesn't like much this administration is doing. That's understandable. But I think it's a little bit classless, frankly, to critique an administration that comes after you. You had your shot. You were there for 8 years. I think the tradition that the Bushes set up of not critiquing the president who comes after you is a good tradition.
Well, and especially when you're still in the midst of a crisis, this is still going on, probably the wrong time to do that. I want to turn and talk about something that you've recently discussed. You've spoken about the need for litigation protection so businesses feel safe getting back to work. Over 700 lawsuits have already been filed against frontline workers, businesses, and universities. So how are you working with President Trump to give business owners and workers the confidence and legal protection to empower this safe reopening and prevent trial lawyers from making a quick buck?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. There are two things that need to happen for the economy to work again. People have to have the courage to go out, and businesses have to have the courage to reopen. And that's the issue. Will our kids get to go to school, back to college this fall, if the universities are afraid of being sued? So what I've suggested, and the president's backed me up 100%, if we have another bill, and we may, related to the coronavirus pandemic, it will have to include liability protections related to this disease that we had never had before, that no one knew how to deal with before. Otherwise, even if people are willing to go out and re-engage in the economy, if businesses are afraid to open because of the trial lawyer out on the sidewalk getting ready, you don't have the confidence you need to begin to get back to work.
Yeah, it's very, very smart, and I think that is something that it really needs to be paid close attention to. So I'm glad you're looking out for that. All right, thank you so much, Senator McConnell, for that last response. We're going to take one last quick break. Stick around for more Team Trump Online.
During the coronavirus pandemic, Joe Biden criticized President Trump's China travel ban.
Hysterical xenophobia.
He was dead wrong. For 40 years, Biden's been wrong on China, supporting trade deals that destroy American jobs, giving China most favored nation status, letting China walk all over us.
The beautiful history we wrote together.
But Biden has never been more wrong than now. Joe Biden in the White House would be a deadly mistake.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to Team Trump Online with the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Mitch McConnell. Senator, the Senate has taken unprecedented actions to develop solutions to safely get senators back to working for the American people. One crucial role of the Senate is to confirm the president's judicial appointments, something that you have undoubtedly been champion at completing, and we thank you for that. As we have seen with so many other issues in the Senate, Democrats seem insistent on blocking everything and tying themselves in knots to justify why they oppose everything the president and Republicans want to accomplish. What do you have to say about these political games to slow down these judicial confirmations?
Well, first, let's talk about how important it is. The president and I agreed from the very beginning. There was nothing more important than a lifetime appointment to the courts. You may recall, I decided not to let President Obama fill the Supreme Court vacancy created in the middle of the presidential election. And that ended up saving the seat for President Trump. And he did a great job. He picked Neil Gorsuch, later picked Brett Kavanaugh. But it's not just two Supreme Court justices. We've done 51 U.S. Circuit Court judges. That's 1/4 of all the circuit judges in the country. Barack Obama did 55 in 8 years. President Trump and I have done 51 in a little over 3 years.
Yep.
We've moved them quickly. He's nominated them quickly. I've moved them through the Senate quickly. What do they have in common? They're all young men and women who believe in the quaint notion that maybe a judge ought to follow the law. Ought to follow the law. Justice Gorsuch once said, we don't wear red robes or blue robes, we wear black robes. So this is an important accomplishment. Of course, the Democrats don't like judges who are not activist judges, who are not active legislators, who are not trying to insert their opinions into cases. And so they have made it very difficult. They've slow-walked nominations. Look, we'll overcome that. We've overcome it so far. Whatever time it takes. They will not be able to keep President Trump and I from continuing to change the American courts for the better for as long as we possibly can.
Yeah, and this has been so important. And I think it doesn't get talked about enough, the impact that this will have. And in addition to what you just mentioned, the 2 Supreme Court justices, also around 200 federal judges confirmed. So what will be the ultimate impact of having these defenders of the Constitution on the bench for future generations?
Well, what it means is if you're a litigant in the federal courts, you're going to feel more comfortable. The judge hasn't already made up his mind before he heard the evidence or before he heard the argument. In other words, an impartial observer who applies the Constitution and the laws as they were written. Justice Scalia used to say, you're not a very good judge if you're not occasionally uncomfortable with the outcome you reach because it's not your personal opinion.
Wow.
He also said, if you want to make policy, why don't you run for office? That's not what we do here. So litigants of both sides ought to be vastly more comfortable in the coming years that they'll be treated fairly in the federal courts of America, thanks to Donald Trump and thanks to this Republican Senate.
Yep. All right, Leader McConnell, as we wrap up tonight's broadcast, I want you to give us your view for the people out there watching tonight. Why is it critical to re-elect President Trump and keep the Senate in the hands of the Republican Party come November 3rd?
Well, I think, Laura, what we need to do is to remind people of what the other guys will do if they take the government.
Yep.
If they take the government, they're going to change this country for the worse for a long time. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to pass legislation to change the numbers of the courts, add Supreme Court justices, add circuit court justices, judges, add district court judges, and fill the vacancies and try to overcome all we did. Second, you've seen how anxious they are to continue to spend. They have the whole government. Our debt, which is already way too large because of this pandemic, will increase dramatically. They want the government to be bigger and bolder in our lives and our options to be less and less. I must confess, I've said in the past, I thought an election was the most important. I was wrong. This is the single most important election in American history because there are vast differences between the two sides. Donald Trump not only wants to make America great again, he wants to keep America great again. And that is the critical decision the American people make this fall.
It is. Well, we appreciate everything you do to work alongside our president every single day. And Leader McConnell, it has been an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us tonight on Team Trump Online. And we wish you the best, good health, and be well. Thank you so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Laura. I enjoyed it.
As always, our campaign to re-elect President Trump continues in full force, and we need you to join us in this fight for our future. If you or your friends, family, or neighbors want to be involved in our fight to re-elect President Donald J. Trump, please visit armyfortrump.com to sign up. There are tons of ways to get involved while following the president's social distancing guidelines. You can attend digital TVLI trainings, host virtual MAGA meetups, and phone bank. I'd like to again thank Senator Mitch McConnell, and thanks to all of you for tuning in with us this evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to standing with you as we fight to re-elect President Donald J. Trump. Good evening, everybody.
Coronavirus infected millions, crushed the world economy. One nation deserves the blame, China. They lied about it, covered it up. Joe Biden coddles China. He criticized President Trump's travel ban, accused him of
hysterical xenophobia.
He voted for most favored nation status and spent decades letting them steal our jobs.
What a beautiful history we wrote together.
Joe Biden won't stand up to China. He never has, he never will.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.